This is Atomic Biscuits, and I'm your host, BACFA. DailyCaller.com has the story, Victor Davis Hanson rips Goldman Sachs for propping up Harris, says others alike are pushing to destroy middle class. Hoover Institution senior fellow Victor Davis Hanson called out Goldman Sachs on Tuesday for suggesting the economy under Vice President Kamala Harris could be more beneficial, arguing the group and others like it are pushing an agenda that could destroy middle-class Americans. Last week, Goldman Sachs economists released a note suggesting Harris's policies might provide a very slight boost to gross domestic product investment, while former President Donald Trump's plans could negatively impact growth due to tariffs and tighter immigration policy. On his podcast, The Victor Davis Hanson Show, Hanson questioned why voters would heed Goldman Sachs when the firm won't face the consequences of whatever disastrous policies could come from a potential Harris administration. Why would we listen to someone who makes so much money that they will be immune from whatever disastrous policies that will destroy the rest of us, and then they can afford the luxury for social or cultural reasons of supporting a neo-socialist? And that's what we're talking about. We really are, Hanson said. Reminds me of the aristocrats during the Bolshevik Warsaw Revolution, who all thought that Lenin was kind of cute and neat, but they had so much land and so much money that he would never go after them, and even if he did, it wouldn't hurt them. I don't listen to anything Goldman Sachs says. I have no animus toward them, but they live in a different world, all those people, Hanson continued. Hanson then called out former Republican Vice President Dick Cheney's recent endorsement of Harris, expressing concern that Cheney's approval of the vice president also implies approval of her potential attorney general choices, such as Keith Ellison, who has received donations from left-wing billionaire George Soros. Dick Cheney is endorsing the Soros attorney generals, and I don't understand the never-Trumpers or the Goldman Sachs people. That's what they endorse. They don't just endorse being kind of liked by the left and kind of having better press coverage, but what they're really doing to the middle class is they're promoting an agenda that will destroy the middle class, Hanson said. The senior fellow continued to slam Democrats as he stated they lie about wanting to push policies that secure the border, have a low-tax, deregulated economy to spur investment and entrepreneurship, and are tough on deterrent foreign policy. The fact is, there's two different agendas, and they're antithetical. One agenda is 90% similar to all the people's, all these characters that I mentioned, to their lifelong advocacies, Hanson continued. So why are they rejecting 90% of what they told us was essential to give them money, or to give them votes, or to give them support? And the answer is, they got their feelings hurt. They lost their magazine. They lost their speaking fees. They lost their TV billets. They lost their authorities. No one listens to them. They're has-beens. They destroyed their careers, they committed career suicide, and they're angry, and they blame it all on the orange man, Hanson said. After unveiling her economic policies in mid-August, Harris faced backlash from political pundits on both sides of the aisle, particularly over her proposal to place a federal ban on corporate price gouging in order to lower high grocery store prices. Critics stated that not only would the proposal potentially drive up prices, but also create black markets. Goldman Sachs did not immediately respond to Daily Caller News Foundation's request for comment.
downtown hotel. The El Paso County Attorney's Office filing a temporary restraining order against the Gateway Hotel. According to court documents, in the last 2 years, police have been called to that hotel almost 700 times.
So these documents also say that the owner of the hotel, Howard Yoon, was first approved for a certificate of occupancy back in May of 2018. And despite that certificate expiring in November of the same year, another certificate has never been issued since. Now, many allegations have been made in these court documents here, including 3 failed inspections, by the El Paso Fire Department, as we take a live look at what we're talking about here. Pictures included in the court documents show several incidents as well, including 2 men in an altercation and another showing a man with what looks like is a weapon. Now, other claims include prostitution occurring within the hotel, along with increased gang activity, trash, several fire hazards in the hotel, and in the documents as well. Officers for the El Paso Police Department are quoted as saying that they're claiming the hotel's owners do nothing to prevent illegal activity from occurring. As we learn more, of course, about this, we'll bring that to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Assistant Chief Sean Taylor with the Millersville Police Department in Middle Tennessee. Many of you may have seen my video last week regarding the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation raiding our police department and my personal residence. They came and they seized evidence regarding corruption that we had locally that tied into corruption nationally, and they took all of our files so that we are unable to complete these cases. The cases that we've been working on affect every American. They affect us in the mortgages, fraudulent mortgages, human trafficking, narcotics trafficking, and many other crimes. We have crisscrossed the United States talking to state attorney generals, senators, congresspeople, and numerous law enforcement officials throughout the United States. We've identified a major corruption that's transnational. It involves the BRICS nations and China and investment companies and fraudulent mortgages on homes here in the United States in very key counties and key states. It goes into the election integrity and fraud, and is creating a geopolitical shift within our political system. This is a multifaceted attack from a foreign adversary who is paying off our local municipal, county, state, and federal politicians to keep from coming to light. We are moving forward with this case in other states and other arenas, even though they have taken our files and our information. This is very important to us. When I say us, I mean we the people. It's time that we the people come together. It's time that we stop allowing ourselves to be segregated by our own government. No matter what race you are, what creed, or what religion you are Americans. We need to stand together as Americans and demand accountability of our elected officials. It's time for this corruption to stop and for us to have our country back so that we know we leave it in the good hands to our children, our grandchildren, because if we don't stand up and do this, we will no longer have a country to hand over to them. I'd like to send a special thanks out to Mark Fincham. He wrote a very good article that all of you can go and read at yournews.com regarding the information that I'm talking about tonight. One of the things that happened that really upsets me that the TBI did at my residence was they urinated in my bathtub and tracked urine throughout my home. To me, that was the government saying, "Piss on you, America." And that's not okay. It's time to stand up, unify, come together peacefully, and demand accountability. Thank you very much.
This morning, the LAPD touted the success of its joint task force that aims to protect children from online predators. The task force conducted a multi-agency operation called Online Guardian last month. They concentrated on online predators trying to lure children into abusive situations. The task force arrested 205 individuals for a range of crimes, including exploitation, lewd acts with a child, and sending obscene material to a child.
Through their diligent efforts, vulnerable children were rescued from further abuse, and victims who had been silenced by the atrocious crimes of child sexual abuse found their voices restored.
The task force consists of more than 60 sub-task forces nationwide that have more than 400 federal, state, and local law enforcement members.
Alejandro Mayorkas denounces deportations, doubles down on cheap labor Bidenomics. This is a story over at Breitbart.com. Former President Donald Trump's campaign promise to deport millions of wealth-shifting illegal immigrants is not good policy, Department of Homeland Security DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said at a political event in Texas on Friday. Mayorkas doubled down on his business-first extraction migration economic policy at the Texas Tribune event, but lamented public opposition to elite demands for more cheap immigrant labor, saying, "I speak to state senators, leaders, House members on both sides of the aisle, and they will speak of visa worker programs and the need to expand the number of visas, and yet nothing is accomplished." This massive inflow shifts billions of dollars in wages and salaries from young families to older investors. For example, on Wednesday, Breitbart News reported that salaries for tech graduates have been flat since 2008, partly because Mayorkas and his agency predecessors have imported millions of foreign graduates via the H-1B, J-1, TN, L-1, and F-1 visa programs. At the event, Mayorkas was asked about rising public opposition to his wealth-shifting migration policies. "I can't speak of what is driving the public reaction to it," he said before suggesting that the mainstream public opposition to his policy is a national security threat. "The divisiveness in our country's political life is preventing progress that our country desperately needs, and that's not only with respect to immigration. What I will say about the divisiveness is a divide speaks of a chasm. It speaks of space, a vacuum, if you will, and that vacuum tends to be filled, and it is filled by our adversaries. Our adversaries, adverse nation states, exploit that divide, and I consider the divisiveness in our country to be actually a homeland security issue." Mayorkas again complimented Canada's supercharged migration system, even though Canadians' expanding poverty, declining productivity, and poll-tested anger are likely to push Prime Minister Justin Trudeau out of office by fall of 2025. Mayorkas said, "We look to the north with Canada. Canada takes a look at its market needs, and it says, you know what, we need 700,000 foreign workers to address our labor needs domestically, and so they build a visa system for that year to address the current market condition, and they say, we're going to bring in 1 million people, and it's market sensitive. We in the United States are dealing with numerical caps on labor-driven visas that were set in 1996. It's 2024. The world has changed. It's remarkable how there can be elite agreement that the visa system is broken and not have an agreement on a solution. The country is suffering as a result of it." Mayorkas is a clever and ruthless advocate for the radical levels of migration that have enabled the government expanding Bidenomics economic policy. He has great sway in the White House and over the economy, partly because President Joe Biden ceded that power to him in 2021 when he asked Vice President Kamala Harris to take a large role in border policies. She refused. Since January 2021, he has helped extract at least 10 million wealth-shifting blue-collar and white-collar migrants from poor countries for use in Americans' workplaces, communities, schools, and hospitals. Mayorkas has repeatedly explained that he supports more migration because of his migrant parents, his sympathy for migrants, and his support for equity between Americans and foreigners. He also justifies his welcome for migrants by saying his priorities are above the law and claiming that the needs of U.S. businesses are paramount regardless of the cost to ordinary Americans, the impact on U.S. children, or Americans' rational opposition. In May of 2023, Mayorkas explained his motivation in a graduation speech to the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. "My drive has been defined by a very clear purpose. My mother's and father's life journeys were defined by displacement. My mother was twice a refugee, first from war-torn Europe, and 19 years later with my father, my sister, and me from the communist takeover of Cuba. They are the primary engine of my drive and the primary reason why I worked so hard, my purpose." Mayorkas is very sympathetic toward migrants and told the Texas event, "I resist the conflation of people seeking a better life with criminality and the smuggling of drugs." He also said he wants to push the cartels out of the labor trafficking business and ensure government control over migration from poor countries. "We have a moral obligation to drive migration differently than in their hands," he said. He uses Congress's vast spending for migrants and his knowledge of the nation's Byzantine immigration law to help migrants get into the United States, get rooted in the U.S. economy, and then win legal status. Mayorkas told the Texas Tribune event that he regretted the bipartisan defeat of the Senate's February border bill. He helped draft the bill to ensure a massive inflow of migrants. "It's very unfortunate from the perspective of the interests of this country that the bill's approval did not occur," Mayorkas said, adding, "Isn't the first time in history that some elements of a society have pointed to migrants as a source of social ills for which they are not responsible. That is a phenomenon that is not unique to the United States, historically and right now." Harris has promised to sign the Mayorkas bill if she's elected president. When asked about Trump's plan to deport millions of migrants, Mayorkas scoffed as he listed the legal and practical hurdles needed to deport the migrants that he imported. How exactly does that work under law? How will Venezuelan migrants be returned to Venezuela? What flight will actually take them to Venezuela? Will Mexico accept the return of a Venezuelan? Will they have been given due process under law to make a claim for asylum? What if they manifest fear under our executive order, assuming our executive order withstands legal challenge? If Mexico says, "No, we're not taking Venezuelans back," what exactly does it mean to immediately remove an individual? What legal appeals process will be provided to them? What resources will mass deportations require? Where will those individuals be held? What will be the funding for that? You know, politics is different than governing. Governing involves not just policy, but operational realities. There are funds, there are people, there are facilities, there are transportation assets that need to be considered when one is talking about executing a policy. So, I would like to see an organization and an operations plan to bring this mass deportation to life, and I don't see it, he said. And that's over at Breitbart.com.
It's been a long time since there was a serious effort to reduce the size of government and to remove absurd regulations.
Yeah.
And the last time there was a really concerted effort on that front was Reagan in the early 80s. So we're 40 years away from a serious effort to remove regulations that don't serve the greater good and reduce the size of government. And I think it's just, if we don't do that, then what's happening is that we get regulations and laws accumulating every year until eventually everything's illegal. And that's why we can't get major infrastructure projects done in the United States. Like if you look at the absurdity of the California high-speed rail, I think they've spent $7 billion and have a 1,600-foot segment that doesn't actually have rail in it. I mean, your tax dollars at work? I mean,
yeah, what are we doing?
Well, that's an expensive 1,600 feet of concrete, And I mean, I think it's like, I realize sometimes I'm perhaps a little optimistic with schedules, but, I wouldn't be doing the things I'm doing if I was, not an optimist. But at the current trend, California high-speed rail might finish sometime next century. Maybe.
Well,
but probably not.
We'll have teleportation by that time.
So. Yeah, exactly. Just have the AI do everything at that point. I think you really think of the United States and many countries. It's arguably worse in the EU, as being like Gulliver tied down by a million little strings. And like any one given regulation is not that bad, but you've got a million of them, or millions actually, and then eventually you just can't get anything done. This is a massive tax on the consumer, on the people. It's just they don't realize that there's this massive tax in the form of irrational regulations. I'll give you a recent example that is just insane. Is that like SpaceX was fined by the EPA $140,000 for they claimed dumping potable water on the ground, drinking water. So. And we're like, this is at Starbase, and we're like, we're in a tropical thunderstorm region. That stuff comes from the sky all the time, and there was no actual harm done. It was just water to cool the launch pad during liftoff, and there's zero harm done. And they agree, yes, there's zero harm done. And we're like, okay, so there's no harm done, and but you want us to pay a $140,000 fine? It's like, yes, because you didn't have a permit. Okay. We didn't know there was a permit needed for zero harm fresh water being on the ground in a place where fresh water falls from the sky all the time.
Got it. Next to the ocean.
Next to the ocean.
Because there's a little bit of water there too.
Yeah. Sometimes it rains so much the roads are flooded. So we're like, how does this make any sense?
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, we're not going to process any more of your applications for Starship launch unless you pay this $140,000. So they just ransomed us, and we're like, okay, so we paid $140,000. But it's like, this is no good. At this rate, we're never going to get to Mars.
Nate Silver dunks all over Bette Midler after she flips out over his electoral college forecast for Trump. This is by Nick Arama over at redstate.com. Kamala Harris seems to be focused on all the wrong things as she goes into the debate, including the size of podiums, as opposed to communicating what her policies are. Of course, the reason she doesn't want to communicate her policies is that she doesn't really want the public to know how radical her positions are. She's hoping to slip by on vibes, and once she gets in, surprise! But no one should even be surprised if they've actually been watching Harris over the years. As CNN proved in a devastating 3.5 minutes, she truly has some scary positions. Democrats are starting to get worried. The momentum now seems to be in former President Donald Trump's favor with recent polls like the New York Times Siena poll. Democrats are particularly ticked off with pollster Nate Silver's forecast about the election college probability. It just seems to be going in Trump's direction. His latest forecast has Trump at 64.4 and Harris at 35.3, and ahead in all the swing states by a fair amount. If that held, that would hand Trump a considerable electoral college victory. That's disturbing rabid Democrats like actress Bette Midler. She accused him of taking money. Never mind that he previously had Harris up a couple of weeks ago before the momentum in the polls started to shift. He's a numbers guy, and if he's ultimately wrong, it will only hurt him, so the attack is sort of silly. It's just that she can't even deal with the possibility that Trump might win. Unfortunately, I think she's going to have to deal with it. But Silver didn't stay quiet. He showed he wasn't just a numbers guy with a brutal response tweet to Midler. "Hey, Bet," he waved. Understand you may still be frustrated. Silence of the Lambs came out the same year as For the Boys, so you were pretty much always going to lose Best Actress to Jodie Foster. In poker, we'd call that a bad beat. But that's no reason to tweet out conspiracy theories. Oof, that's wicked, but fully deserved. Someone posted, "Hello 911, I'd like to report a murder." That's going to leave a mark, said Jim Thompson. We'll get more of an idea of how things shake out I fully expect Harris and or the media to try to twist something against Trump. It's what they do, but it's clear Democrats know that Harris is in trouble, and Bet isn't the only one pulling her hair out thinking about conspiracy theories. If Trump wins, you probably aren't going to be able to measure it with existing technology the fits are going to throw. That's over at redstate.com. For takeaways from House hearing on non-citizen voting, this is posted by Fred Lucas on September 10th and over at the Daily Signal. That's dailysignal.com. Tens of thousands of non-citizens are registered to vote and have voted, House members and testifying experts asserted Tuesday. A House subcommittee held a hearing Tuesday titled The Biden-Harris Border Crisis, Non-Citizen Voting, that examined non-citizen voting and the nation's porous border. The hearing comes as House Republicans push to include safeguards to ensure that only U.S. citizens cast a vote as part of a continuing resolution to keep funding the government. Justice Department announced September 5th that an illegal immigrant from Guatemala would plead guilty after being charged with falsely assuming the identity of a U.S. citizen in 2011 and illegally voting in multiple Alabama elections over the years. My book, The Myth of Suppression, details past instances where non-citizen voting affected the outcome of the local elections. Here are 4 big moments from the hearing held by the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution and Limited Government. 1. What if it's your vote? The 1993 National Voter Registration Act and the 2002 Help America Vote Act made it virtually impossible to prevent non-citizens from registering to vote either accidentally or intentionally, testified Rosemary Jinks, policy director of the Immigration Accountability Project. Neither a driver's license nor a social security number provides proof of U.S. citizenship, Jinks said. All 50 states and the District of Columbia issue driver's licenses, including real IDs, to lawfully present non-citizens, while 19 states also issue driver's license to illegal aliens. Every alien authorized to work in the United States is eligible for a social security number. The Biden-Harris administration has been handing out work authorizations like candy to inadmissible aliens, with social security issuances following close behind. Noting the ease with which illegal immigrants may register to vote, she turned the questions to the House panel. Why is it okay if even one American citizen's vote is canceled by an illegal's vote? What if it's your vote? Jenks asked lawmakers. Stoke anti-immigrant fear. Representative Jerry Nadler, Penguin, Democrat from New York, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, insisted that non-citizen voting isn't a widespread problem. Republicans rely on the false premise that there is widespread non-citizen voting in order to advance dangerous legislation like the SAVE Act and other burdensome, unnecessary measures requiring proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections, Nadler said. SAVE Act is short for the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. If enacted and signed into law, the Republican-sponsored bill would amend the 1993 National Voter Registration Act, also known as the Motor Voter Law, to require that states obtain documentary proof of U.S. citizenship before anyone could register to vote. Representative Mary Gay Scanlon, Democrat from Pennsylvania, accused Republican lawmakers of a propaganda campaign. Bills combating non-citizen voting are really about politics, not policy, Scanlon said. These bills are not rooted in reality, but are widely used to stoke anti-immigrant fear. House Republicans' proposed amendment to the spending bill would accomplish the same objective as the measure that passed the GOP-controlled chamber in July. Senate Democrats, who control the upper chamber, opposed the bill. If the two sides can agree now, it could lead to a partial shutdown of the government. Election lawyer Cleta Mitchell, founder and chair of the Foundation for Accountability and Integrity in Elections Fund, questioned Democrats' continued rationale for opposing the SAVE Act. Democrats oppose the SAVE Act ostensibly because it is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in a federal election, Mitchell testified, and it is illegal for millions of people to swarm across our borders without documentation. But nonetheless, this administration under border czar Kamala Harris has adopted just such a policy of opening the door and letting anyone and everyone into the country illegally, already against federal law. She added that Democrats' goal is to change the electorate. If they can't persuade the American people to want their Marxist policies for America, just import voters who don't speak the language, don't have a shared commitment to our country and our national principles, and get them into the very porous voter registration system and collect their votes, Mitchell said. Number 3, only take a few thousand. Subcommittee Chairman Chip Roy, Republican from Texas, referred to a 2014 study by Old Dominion University and George Mason University. It estimated that 6.4% of non-citizens, or 1.2 million at the time, illegally voted in the 2008 election. That number might have tipped a U.S. Senate race in Minnesota that year, as well as the presidential vote in North Carolina. It would only take a few thousand votes, non-citizens voting, much less than the 1.2 million estimated, to impact the outcome of razor-thin elections, Roy said. In the 2020 election, Joe Biden carried Arizona over Donald Trump by 10,000 votes, Georgia by 12,000 votes, Wisconsin by 20,000 votes, and Pennsylvania by 81,000 votes. The other side likes to point out it's already illegal for non-citizens to vote. That is technically true. They fail to mention that the Supreme Court's interpretation of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 literally prohibits states from verifying citizenship during the voter registration process, Roy said. This means it is impossible to enforce the law on the front end. Consequently, the primary defense against non-citizens registering to vote is a literal box-checking exercise on a voter registration form. The Texas Republican noted that since 2021, Texas has removed about 6,500 non-citizens from voter rolls, 19 of whom had voting histories. Since 2022, Virginia has removed 6,300 non-citizens from its rolls. Alabama removed 3,251 non-citizens, and Ohio 597, Roy added. Florida Secretary of State Cord Byrd reminded the House subcommittee of the close 2000 presidential election decided in Florida by just 537 votes. Miami-Dade County alone, Florida's largest county, has over 715 precincts. A single illegal non-citizen vote in each precinct can change the outcome of a presidential election, Byrd said. Byrd, a Republican, cited the 2006 bipartisan election reform report led by former President Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, and former Secretary of State James Baker, a Republican, that called for preventing non-citizen voting. Every illegitimate vote of a non-citizen negates the legitimate vote of a citizen, Byrd said. Nationally, preventing non-citizens from registering to vote and voting is the #1 priority of states committed to election integrity. He said Florida has prosecuted non-citizens who attempt to fraudulently vote in an election. Floridians have changed our state constitution. We have strengthened our laws. We have engaged in litigation, and we have an office dedicated to investigating election crimes, Byrd said. The only impediment to doing more is the federal government. That's why states need action from our congressional leaders. Mitchell, head of the Foundation for Accountability and Integrity in Elections Fund, added that Republicans' SAVE Act would be important in the 22 states that allow same-day voter registration. This requirement will interrupt one of the biggest threats to the integrity of the 2024 election, the organized roundup by left-wing advocacy groups of scores of illegals to register and vote them on the same day before anyone can determine if the individuals were eligible to vote in the election. That's over at dailysignal.com. The next story comes to us from theblaze.com. That's Blaze Media. Illegal alien arrested for alleged child rape in Martha's Vineyard, has just been released from prison. Immigration officials called out local law enforcement who ignored detainer requests. An illegal immigrant who is charged with child rape on the affluent island of Martha's Vineyard had just been released from prison for other violent crimes. 24-year-old Warley Neto of Brazil was arrested after being indicted for 5 counts of child rape and 5 counts of enticing a minor under 16. Neto had entered into the U.S. illegally in 2018 and was released with a notice to appear before an immigration judge, officials said. Instead, he was arrested 5 years later for strangulation, assault and battery, and threat to commit a crime. He was convicted and sentenced to a year in prison on June 2023, but was released after only serving 90 days. Months later, he was arrested for the child rape charges. Public details about the new charges are limited because of the age of the victim. ICE officials said the local law enforcement officials were cooperating with their detainer request. Warley Neto allegedly repeatedly assaulted a Massachusetts child and represents a significant threat to the safety of our neighborhoods, read a statement from ICE's Boston Field Office Director Todd M. Lyons. Martha's Vineyard is famous as the site where asylum seekers were sent in 2022 by Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis to pressure Democrats who were ostensibly supporting sanctuary state policies. It's unclear whether Neto was one of those people sent to the island. We're grateful for the cooperation of the Dukes County Sheriff's Office for prioritizing public safety and allowing Neto's safe transfer of custody to enforcement and removal operations, Lyons continued. Too often, local jurisdictions refuse to honor immigration detainers and release dangerous offenders back into the community to reoffend. ERO Boston will continue to apprehend and remove the most egregious non-citizen offenders from New England. This is over at theblaze.com. Oracle to power 1 gigawatt data center with trio of tiny nuclear reactors. Isn't saying how much they'll cost or when they'll fire it up. This story is over at theregister.com. Oracle is going nuclear over growing demand for AI data centers, and that's not a metaphor for Larry Ellison's mood. On Monday's quarterly earnings call, Oracle's founder, chair, and CTO revealed the database giant and cloud provider had secured building permits for a trio of small modular reactors, that's SMRs, to power a data center with over a gigawatt of AI compute capacity. If you're not familiar, SMRs are miniaturized nuclear reactors not unlike those used in naval vessels for nearly 70 years. Unlike marine reactors, SMRs are designed to be mass-produced, and unlike conventional reactor designs that won't require massive physical infrastructure, in theory they'll therefore be less expensive to operate, but still capable of producing tens or hundreds of megawatts of energy. But no SMR is currently operating, and pilot projects have not gone well. Oracle's interest in SMRs as power source comes as the cloud provider looks to expand its data center footprint. Oracle has 162 cloud data centers live and under construction throughout the world. The largest of these data centers is 800 megawatts, and it will contain acres of NVIDIA GPU clusters able to train the world's largest AI models, Ellison told analysts on the call. Soon, Oracle will begin construction of data centers that are more than a gigawatt. Execs did not say when the gigawatt-class data centers and the SMRs powering them will come online. However, we've previously looked at SMRs at the data center power source, and even the most optimistic estimates put the first deployments in the early 2030s. We've asked Oracle for comment, and we'll let you know if the megacorp responds. Again, that's over at theregister.com. I try to keep an eye on different industries here in the States, and one of the ones that I follow a feed for is the Kaiser Family Foundation's Health News. ACA enrollment platforms suspended over alleged foreign access to consumer data. ACA is the Obamacare health plan. Suspicions that U.S. consumers' personal information could be accessed from India led regulators to abruptly bar two large private sector enrollment websites from accessing the Affordable Care Act marketplace in August. New details about the suspensions come in legal filings made late Friday, stemming from an effort by the two to regain access to the Obamacare portal marketplace before the upcoming ACA open enrollment period, which starts November 1st. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services wrote in a September 2nd letter to the companies that they were suspended after the agency identified a serious lapse in security posture that could have led to marketplace data, including consumers' personal information, being accessed from overseas. The letter included in the court filings also noted that the regulators will audit the two companies because they have reasonable suspicion that they are players in a separate problem, signing up people for Obamacare coverage or changing their policies without the consumer's permission. Whether those legal issues will be resolved before the upcoming enrollment period is open is in an open question. Currently, the concerns raised about the companies remain allegations, with none of the legal challenges or the audit close to a ruling or conclusion. Still, the larger issue of fraudulent ACA enrollment by rogue insurance agents seeking commissions will continue to pose a headache for regulators, with more than 200,000 complaints filed by consumers in the first 6 months of 2024, and it has been becoming a political problem for the Biden administration. GOP lawmakers blamed the schemes partly on Biden-backed expanded Obamacare premium subsidies. Anyway, there's lots more to read over here at the Kaiser Family Foundation's website. I'll leave this and all the links I share today out on Gab at BACFA.
You've said a lot today. In your opening statement, you attacked President Trump and his response. I'd also like to remind you of statements that you've said. On April 13th of 2020 on the Howard Stern Show, you said, and I quote, "Trump has delivered for New York." He has. And then you talked about Trump sending the ship, the comfort ship. Mind you that the comfort ship was sent to New York on March 30th of 2020. That was just a few days after you signed the directive to put COVID-19 patients into nursing homes on March 25th, which led to murdering people's parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Yes, murdering them. Today you said, and I'll quote you, you said that high deaths in nursing homes is a conspiracy theory. Would you like to turn to the people here in this room today whose mothers died and their fathers died in these nursing homes and call them conspiracy theorists? Do you have the audacity to do that, Mr. Cuomo?
I never said that, Congresswoman.
You said that today. You're under oath.
I never
There
said
is video.
high deaths
There's
are
video
conspiracy.
of all of your words today.
I never
You can
said
be
that.
fact checked. We'll do that when this is over.
Yeah.
You also blamed staff for spreading COVID in nursing homes, not COVID patients. You blamed the staff.
The staff
But yet on
brought
March
COVID in.
25th, I didn't ask you a question, I'm talking to you. On March 25th, you signed a directive to put COVID-19 patients into nursing homes. On March 30th, President Trump sent the comfort ship, and you did not put COVID patients in the comfort ship. You didn't send them to the Javis Medical Center that President Trump had built, which was a field hospital. You didn't send them there. You put them in nursing homes, which is murder.
That's not.
No, that's murdering people. I'm saying that right now, and I'm also saying what a lot of people believe what your actions did. Let's also talk about some other things that you've done. Mr. Cuomo, let's talk about a tweet that you made, because there's an indictment out on a woman named Linda Sun. Linda Sun, and I'll read this indictment. It says on April 4th, politician number one publicly thanked PRC official number one, both in public remarks and in a post on Twitter. That's this right here. For helping arrange the donation, which was scheduled to arrive at JFK Airport in Queens, New York that day. So, Mr. Cuomo, you were thanking China, the PRC, while you had a woman named Linda Sun working for you, who has now been identified as a Chinese spy. Now, today you have come before the American people in our committee. You have insulted many people, including people in this room and people watching this hearing who lost their loved ones because of your March 25th directive. And at the same time, you were thanking the Chinese government while you had a Chinese spy working for you. So, Mr. Cuomo, I've read a lot about you, including the fact that 13 women that work for you accused you of sexually inappropriate behavior, which thanks to the Democrat DOJ helped you out of that. But I'd like to say this, and I'll ask you, are you either the dumbest tool of the Chinese government, or did you know for a fact that you were being used by the Chinese spy that was working for you?
I've read a lot about you too, Congresswoman. I think this is a very serious matter. It
is serious, that's right.
She was a junior member in my team. I wouldn't recognize her if she was in this room today. But I think it is a serious matter. I don't think this was just in New York. I think there is an infiltration of Chinese, maybe Russian operatives.
The Democrat Party's definitely had a problem with Chinese spies. Yes, you're right. And I want to remind you, you're under oath.
Yeah, and I think it's a serious issue, and I think the federal government and the state government should work together on it. The state government doesn't really have the ability to do the international reconnaissance, but the federal government does, and I think they should work together to make sure they're doing the best they can to do the vetting.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter the indictment for the record.
Second, I will bring back free speech in America because it's been taken away. They've taken away your free speech, and the fake news is a threat to this country. They are just horrible. These are horrible people. Not everyone. I mean, I know most of them up there. Some are good. Hello, Brian. No, some are good, and most of them are just absolutely terrible human beings. They know what's going on. You know what they'll write today? But look at this crowd. It goes from corner to corner. It's a mess. I flew over and I said, that's a lot of people down there. And you know what they'll say today or tomorrow when they write? Donald Trump spoke today in Wisconsin before a small crowd of people, a small gathering of people. They are just so bad. I don't know. It's it's really hard to turn it back around unless they used to be like the police force. They'd write the truth, but they're no longer the police force. They're the police force for opposite. They're a police force for bad. They're bad people, and they're very dishonest. And a lot of people don't understand. When you're a politician like these people, like me, like others, and you happen to be a Republican or somewhat conservative, they write just the opposite of what the facts are. And if you're driving a cab, if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, if you're something, other than that, you don't know the details. When we know the facts and then the story gets written the exact opposite of what it is, you start to lose faith in the press, I will tell you. But I will sign an executive order banning any federal employee from colluding to limit speech, and we will fire every federal bureaucrat who is engaged in domestic censorship under the Harris regime. We will do that.
The attempt to end my husband's life was a horrible, distressing experience. Now, the silence around it feels heavy. I can't help but wonder, why didn't law enforcement officials arrest the shooter before the speech? There is definitely more to this story, and we need to uncover the truth.
That cloud seeding is booming. They anticipate at least another 200 ground cloud seeding machines to be put in before next season.
Ginger, this is such a cool concept, but is it too good to be true? I mean, how do we know that the chemicals that they're spraying from the air aren't bad for us or the planet?
The good news is we've been doing this since the 1940s and 50s. Other countries do it, and there have been a lot of research projects that have shown that the silver iodide, for example, is not found. It's negligible once it gets down to ground level.
So, again, I don't want to be too skeptical, but is there anything wrong with manipulating nature like this?
I think that's the question we should have asked when we built every single parking lot and every rooftop. We have been manipulating weather with us for a very long time. I do think that looking at and continuing research on when these programs get bigger, if it will affect people downstream, that needs to be watched.
At least we're manipulating it now to help the planet. So
we're here with Kristen Megan. She's a military veteran, right?
Yes, I was in the U.S. Air Force for 9 years.
Wow. And you came out and blew the whistle on geoengineering, things that you witnessed were going on. Can you give us the real nutshell?
Absolutely. Basically, I had heard of what many people know as the term chemtrails. And I worked in a job called bioenvironmental engineering. And I thought that was insane. And why would we do something like that? Modify the weather by using hazardous materials in our atmosphere? So, and actually the process of trying to debunk it or disprove it, I realized it was actually coming right out of my office as I was one of the people that was approving the chemicals. And it really shook the core of my oath. And I did a lot of sampling, did a lot of investigation, and I blew the whistle and I got out. And I've now used my credentials, my oath, and my powers for good to help people understand it's very real. It's now openly admitted. There are multiple forms of weather modification. I specifically found the one of stratospheric aerosol injection. And collectively around the globe, we have to understand that it is now being admitted because they're saying it's combating climate change. Well, the climate change we need to be worried about is man-made climate engineering, also known as geoengineering.
And when you say you had chemicals being pumped into the air, what kind of chemicals are they putting out that rain down on humanity, basically?
Nanoparticulate metals, like we had different sulfates and barium and strontium. I know it's probably changed over time. I know they use silver iodide for certain things, but these are the odd part of it was the quantities that I saw them coming in, the form that they were coming in, and it's the same type of materials that I was trying to engineer out of the workplace to substitute with safer materials. And when you notice that what's called the safety data sheet, the information about a chemical of what personal protective equipment to wear, how do you dispose of it, how do you pack it to ship it. When key information is missing, I ask questions, and my questions led to demonization, and I knew I found something I shouldn't have.
That's insane. So these metals are basically toxic for the humans, I would presume, or?
Yes, because it also has aluminum, and a lot of people will tell you, well, these things aren't horrible in small quantities. It's not small quantities, because when you are putting things above us, the dissipation rates are dependent on weather and climate, but it's...
NPR, National Public Radio, NPR.org had this story. Bank of America raises minimum hourly pay to $24 as tellers flee the industry. I believe these are the ones they said would we be replacing with bots first, right? Bank of America is pledging to pay its bank tellers and other hourly workers at least $24 per hour starting in October. The company says that this pay raise from $23 per hour currently will affect thousands of its 212,000 employees. The wage increase will particularly affect tellers and other customer-facing employees, such as call center workers. Several big banks have increased their starting pay for hourly workers in these past few years, in part due to the difficulty of attracting workers to these relatively unglamorous and non-remote friendly jobs. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that banks will need to fill some 27,000 teller positions every year for the next decade. Bank of America has been raising wages relatively aggressively for its hourly workers since 2019, when it paid $15 per hour. The bank has previously said that it plans to pay all such employees $25 per hour by next year, and even today, the company is already paying significantly above the median wage for all U.S. bank tellers, who earn $18.10 per hour in 2023, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yet this latest increase also underscores the vast income disparities across the financial industry between the hourly retail workers who deal with customers and the bonus-happy investment bankers, traders, and executives whose huge pay packages contribute to Wall Street's well-heeled reputation. Again, this is over at NPR.org. Disgraced fashion mogul Peter Nygaard sentenced to 11 years in prison for sexually assaulting multiple women in secret suite at his office. This is over at nypost.com. Convicted fashion mogul Peter Nygaard on Monday was sentenced to 11 years in prison for sexually assaulting several women inside a secret bedroom suite at his company's Toronto-based offices. An Ontario judge denounced Nygaard as a sexual predator and a Canadian success story gone very wrong during a hearing in a Toronto courtroom, the Toronto Star reported. Nygaard, the Finnish-born mogul whose family immigrated to Canada, where he built his affordable women's clothing brand up from a store in Winnipeg into an empire that expanded throughout North America, was convicted in November on 4 counts of sexual assault. The victims of the attacks, which spanned more than 2 decades, were as young as 16 years old. Nygaard, 83, invited the women to visit his custom-built office under pretenses ranging from tours to job interviews. Prosecutors said he then lured the women into his bedroom suite and assaulted them, at times plying them with drugs and alcohol. According to prosecutors, Nygaard's suite had a giant bed, a stone jacuzzi, a bar, and doors with no handle, doors with automatic keypad-operated locks controlled by Peter Nygaard. Nygaard, who in 2020 was reported to have an estimated net worth of $900 million, also faces civil and criminal charges in the United States. Nygaard has been fighting extradition to the U.S. since 2022, but earlier this year, a Manitoba court ordered the mogul to surrender to U.S. authorities to face sex trafficking and racketeering charges. In December 2020, federal prosecutors in Manhattan unsealed a 9-count indictment against Nygaard, alleging that he enticed young and impoverished women to his estate in the Bahamas with cash and promises of modeling opportunities. At least 10 women filed suit against Nygaard in New York, alleging that they were as young as 14 or 15 when he gave them alcohol or drugs and then raped them. Since then, 57 women, including 18 Canadians, have joined the lawsuit, which alleges that Nygaard used violence, intimidation, bribery, and company employees to lure victims and avoid accountability for decades. The class action lawsuit says Nygaard used his company, bribery of Bahamian officials, and considerable influence in the fashion industry to recruit victims in the Bahamas, the United States, and Canada. Nygaard has denied all allegations and blames a conspiracy caused by a feud with a billionaire neighbor in the Bahamas. Last year, Nygaard was ordered by a New York state court to pay a record sum of $203 million to the neighbor, billionaire hedge fund manager Louis Bacon, who sued the fashion mogul for defamation. Again, this is over at nypost.com. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Atomic Biscuits. I hope you will take time to have a wonderful week with your family and friends. Focus on what matters, and we'll see you here next week on another episode of Atomic Biscuits. So long.
Thanks for joining us for Atomic Biscuits. Tune in again next week for more news and music. Check out BACFA on Gab at BACFA, as well as BitChute, Rumble, D-Live and Odyssey. Check out LastScoutRadio.com for fun content. Listen to WBN 324 on radio stations around the world, on many streaming platforms, and World Broadcasting Network WBN 324.zil.